He thought he was just buying a forgotten piece of land, a chance to start fresh, away from everything that haunted him. When Jake stumbled upon the abandoned farmhouse listed for $1, it felt like fate giving him an escape route. A rundown old place no one cared about, sitting quietly on the edge of a small town where secrets seemed buried beneath the soil. Jake didn't expect much from it, just a roof over his head and a little space to breathe. But what he found inside that crumbling house would change everything, and threaten to unravel his entire life. The moment Jake stepped through the creaking front door, a chill ran down his spine. Dust hung thick in the air, and broken windows let in the pale morning light. It was like stepping back in time, or maybe into a forgotten nightmare. He brushed aside cobwebs and picked his way through scattered debris, trying to imagine what this place had once been. But then, beneath a loose floorboard in the corner of the living room, his foot hit something hard. Curious, he knelt down, lifting the board, only to reveal the skeletal remains of a woman, her bones aged and brittle, but unmistakably real. But it wasn't just the shock of finding a skeleton in an old farmhouse that stopped Jake cold. Around the neck of the remains hung a delicate necklace, a necklace Jake knew all too well. It was the same necklace his mother had worn for years, the one she never took off, the one everyone said was her most treasured possession. How did it get here? Who was this woman? And what did this have to do with Jake's family? Jake's heart pounded as memories he tried to bury started flooding back, whispers from his childhood, strange absences, hushed arguments he was never meant to hear. The farmhouse wasn't just abandoned, it was hiding a secret. A secret someone had desperately tried to erase. And now, by buying that old property, Jake had unknowingly stepped into a mystery tied to his own bloodline, a mystery that could destroy everything he thought he knew about his family. With every creak of the floor, every shadow that stretched across the peeling wallpaper, Jake felt the weight of something darker than just the past catching up with him. He wanted to run, to leave it all behind, but the discovery had pulled him deeper into a web of lies, betrayal, and perhaps even murder. The quiet town where he hoped to find peace suddenly seemed full of watchers, neighbors who smiled a little too kindly and whispered just out of earshot. As Jake stared at the skeleton and the necklace shining faintly in the dim light, 1,000 questions raced through his mind. Why was the woman buried here? Was she connected to his mother, or was the necklace a cruel coincidence? And most terrifying of all, who else knew the truth, and how far would they go to keep it buried? The past and present collided in that forgotten farmhouse, and Jake realized that escaping his history wasn't going to be so simple. Some stories don't stay buried, no matter how hard you try. And in the days to come, the quiet farm would become the stage for a dangerous reckoning, one that could bring justice or ruin. What Jake doesn't know yet is that uncovering the truth might not just threaten his family's name, it might put his very life at risk. And just as the sun set over the dilapidated farm, casting long shadows over the land, one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. If you think this story is eerie now, wait until you hear what Jake uncovers next: secrets hidden in plain sight, and a past that refuses to stay silent. Stay with me, because the real mystery is about to unfold. Jake sat back on the dusty floor, the weight of the necklace heavy in his hands. His mind raced, trying to piece together how this woman could be connected to his mother. Or to his family at all. The farmhouse had been in his family's name for decades, but no one had lived here for years. His father had always said the place was cursed and refused to talk about it. Now, Jake understood why. There were secrets buried deep beneath the rotting floorboards, and they were clawing their way to the surface. Growing up, Jake had never known much about his family's history. His mother was a quiet woman, always careful about what she said, and his father was distant, especially after the divorce. The farmhouse had always been a dark shadow in their stories, something his parents avoided. But now, standing in that broken-down house, Jake realized the past wasn't just something to ignore. It was alive, and it was watching him. He remembered the day he found the listing online, a strange, almost unbelievable offer. $1 for an entire farmhouse. It seemed like a joke at first, but he figured no one else wanted it. Maybe because of the rumors, or because of what had happened here long ago. The townspeople barely mentioned the place, and when they did, their voices dropped low. Jake had been desperate to escape the city, to start over, and the farmhouse seemed like the perfect place to hide from everything, from his mistakes, from the ghosts of his past. But now, with the skeleton and the necklace, that escape felt impossible. Jake stood and began to look around the room more carefully. The air was thick with dust and something else, a faint, sour smell that hinted at long-forgotten stories. He noticed faded photographs pinned to the walls, their edges curled and torn. Faces stared back at him, unfamiliar, yet somehow hauntingly familiar. There was a woman in one of the photos, wearing the very same necklace he held. She looked peaceful there, smiling at the camera, but the image didn't match the cold truth hidden beneath the floor. He wanted to call someone, the police, a historian, anyone. But something held him back. Was he ready to open a door that might never close again? The questions were piling up too fast. Who was the woman? Why was she buried here, hidden away? And why did the necklace belong to his mother, or at least look exactly like hers? Jake's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, the sharp snap of a branch outside the window. He froze, heart hammering. The house creaked as if it was breathing, alive with secrets. He stepped outside into the cool evening, the sky streaked with pink and orange. The farm stretched out in front of him, fields overgrown and wild, like time had forgotten this place. He spotted an old truck parked by the barn, not his. Then, from the corner of his eye, he caught movement near the edge of the property. A figure standing just beyond the trees, watching. Jake's breath caught. Who else was here? And what did they want? He wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted safety. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, it was clear that safety was the one thing he wouldn't find on this farm. Not tonight, not ever. Jake knew he had to dig deeper. Whatever was buried with that woman, and tied to his family's past, was about to pull him into a darkness he couldn't escape. The farmhouse wasn't just a place to hide anymore. It was a puzzle, and every piece brought him closer to a truth someone had desperately tried to keep hidden. But uncovering that truth might come at a cost. And as Jake looked back at the house one last time before night fully settled in, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, not just by a stranger, but by something far older and far more dangerous than he could imagine. The story was just beginning. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. Jake barely slept, haunted by the image of the skeleton and the necklace that refused to leave his mind. The farmhouse had become a magnet for questions he didn't want to ask but couldn't ignore. Every creak in the night sounded like a warning. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret waiting to be uncovered. Jake tried to find answers the only way he knew, by talking to the locals. The town was small, and almost everyone seemed to know a little about the old farmhouse, though no one wanted to say much. At the diner, the waitress glanced nervously when Jake brought it up, her voice dropping to a whisper. People say that place has a dark history, a tragedy nobody wants to remember. She wouldn't go into detail, but her eyes told Jake he wasn't the first outsider to be drawn here, and he probably wouldn't be the last. Then there was Mr. Hollis, the town's unofficial historian. A grizzled man with a slow drawl, he knew the stories that weren't written down. When Jake showed him the necklace, Hollis's expression changed. "That's an old family heirloom," he said carefully. "Belonged to the Marston family, one of the oldest around here." "Your folks?" Jake nodded, though he didn't know much about the Marstons besides the rumors his parents never confirmed. There was a scandal, years ago. A woman went missing, one of the Marstons. Folks said she ran off, but others whispered it wasn't so simple. Some think she met a bad end, and some say the farmhouse was involved. The more Jake listened, the heavier the weight on his chest grew. His family's history wasn't just complicated, it was tangled with something dark, maybe even deadly. And now, he was right in the middle of it. Back at the farmhouse, Jake found more signs of the past trying to speak to him. A hidden drawer in an old dresser held yellowed letters, written in a shaky hand. The letters told of love, betrayal, and fear, of a woman desperate to escape something terrible. One letter mentioned a name Jake hadn't heard before, a man who'd come and gone, leaving behind whispers and broken promises. The name felt familiar, stirring memories of hushed family arguments and locked doors. Jake's mother, usually distant and reserved, became harder to reach. When he called her, her voice trembled, and she quickly changed the subject. It was as if the farmhouse and its secrets had opened a wound she wasn't ready to face. Jake realized that whatever happened here wasn't just history, it was a pain still alive in his family's heart. Then there was the stranger. Jake caught glimpses of him around the farm, a shadow in the woods, a car parked too long on the road. One evening, as Jake walked the perimeter, the stranger finally approached. His face was weathered, eyes sharp but tired. He didn't introduce himself but warned Jake to stop digging. "Some things are better left buried," he said quietly, voice low with a threat Jake couldn't ignore. But Jake couldn't turn back now. The farmhouse had become more than a refuge, it was a puzzle he had to solve, a story he had to tell, even if it meant confronting family betrayals and dark secrets no one wanted to admit. The line between past and present was blurring, and Jake felt caught between two worlds, one of truth and one of silence. Every discovery pulled him deeper into a mystery that stretched far beyond the farmhouse's crumbling walls. Who had buried the woman? Why? And how far would someone go to keep the past hidden? The answers seemed close, yet just out of reach, tangled in lies and fear. Jake's fight wasn't just about the skeleton or the necklace. It was about uncovering the truth behind the silence, the truth that had been buried for years, waiting for someone brave enough to find it. But bravery came with a price, and Jake was about to learn how much he was willing to pay. The nights grew colder, and Jake felt the farmhouse closing in around him, like the walls themselves were watching. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed, sometimes by the stranger, other times by the heavy silence that seemed to press on his chest. His phone buzzed with missed calls from his mother, but he didn't have the heart to answer. Every time he thought about calling her back, the memory of her trembling voice stopped him. Whatever this secret was, it had fractured more than just the past, it was breaking his family apart. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across the overgrown fields, Jake found something new. A faint trail of disturbed earth near the old well. It looked fresh, too fresh for a place abandoned so long. His pulse quickened. Had someone been here recently, digging? And if so, why? He was no longer just uncovering history, he was stepping into a dangerous game. The stranger's warnings echoed in his mind, but Jake's curiosity pushed him forward. He had to know the truth. The farmhouse wasn't just a crumbling relic, it was the key to unraveling a mystery that might explain the woman's death, the necklace, and the silent fear in his mother's eyes. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. The wind howled through broken windows, carrying with it faint whispers he couldn't quite make out. Was it just the wind, or was someone trying to send him a message? His flashlight flickered as he searched the house, retracing his steps to the hidden floorboard. But this time, the floor beneath him felt less stable, like the house was warning him to stop. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps outside made him freeze. Holding his breath, he peered through the cracked door. The stranger was there again, watching. Their eyes met, and Jake saw something in the man's gaze, a mix of warning, fear, and desperation. But before Jake could react, the stranger disappeared into the night. The next morning, Jake decided to visit the town's old records office. He needed more than whispered stories and old letters. Digging through dusty files, he found a report from decades ago, an official case about the disappearance of a woman named Clara Marston. The details were sparse but chilling: foul play suspected, no body found, case cold and unsolved. And then there was a mention of a necklace, a family heirloom never recovered. His hands trembled. Clara Marston. The woman in the farmhouse. The skeleton. The necklace. It was all connected, and Jake was the one standing in the middle of it. When he returned home, Jake found the farmhouse door ajar. Someone had been inside. His heart pounded as he stepped cautiously through the house, noticing signs of a struggle, a broken chair, footprints in the dust. Whoever was here had been searching, just like him. And now, they knew Jake was digging too deep. That's when the phone rang. No caller ID. Jake answered, breath shallow. A voice, barely above a whisper, warned him once more to stop. You don't know what you're messing with. Leave it alone, or you'll lose more than just your peace. But Jake couldn't stop. Every clue pulled him closer to a truth someone wanted buried forever. The farmhouse was no longer just a mystery, it was a trap, and Jake was running out of time. With danger closing in, and his family's darkest secrets threatening to explode into the light, Jake faced a choice: walk away and forget everything, or push forward and risk everything he loved. As the sun set, casting the farmhouse into darkness, Jake stood in the middle of the broken floorboards, the necklace heavy in his pocket. Somewhere beneath him, the earth held secrets waiting to be uncovered, secrets that could shatter his world forever. And just beyond the edge of the property, the stranger watched, waiting for Jake to make his next move. Just as Jake thought he was beginning to grasp the edges of the mystery, the farmhouse seemed to reveal another hidden layer, one that shook him to his core. A week after the threatening phone call, he found an old, locked chest tucked away in the basement. It had been concealed behind a stack of rotting crates, coated in dust and spider webs. With trembling hands, Jake pried it open, and inside were more letters, photographs, and a small, worn journal. The handwriting was shaky but urgent, filled with entries that painted a darker picture than Jake ever expected. The journal belonged to Clara Marston. The woman buried beneath the floor, and it told a story of fear, betrayal, and a desperate attempt to expose a secret that had been festering in the Marston family for years. Clara wrote about threats, about someone close to her who was trying to silence her, and a plan to escape the town and the family she once trusted. But the last pages ended abruptly, filled with scribbled words that suggested she was running out of time. Jake's hands tightened around the journal as he read a chilling passage. If you find this, know the truth must come out. They're not who they seem. My death won't be the end. That night, Jake's phone buzzed again, this time a text message. No words, just a photo. It was a picture of his mother, younger and smiling, standing beside Clara Marston. Both wore the same necklace. The realization hit Jake like a freight train. His mother wasn't just connected to Clara, they had been close, maybe even friends or sisters in arms. Why had no one ever mentioned this? Why had his mother hidden the necklace for so long? The stakes had just skyrocketed. The story wasn't just about a buried skeleton or a family mystery anymore. It was about lies that had been spun for decades, about trust broken between people Jake thought he knew. And more than that, it was about the possibility that someone in his own family had a hand in Clara's fate. The stranger who had warned him to stop digging was no longer just a threat from the outside. Jake began to wonder if danger lurked within his own bloodline, someone who wanted the past buried so badly they would go to any length to protect the secret. Tension tightened like a noose around Jake's throat. The farmhouse, the skeleton, the necklace, they were all pieces of a puzzle darker and more dangerous than he'd imagined. With every answer came more questions, and with every step forward, the risk grew. Jake realized he was no longer just a curious buyer of an abandoned farmhouse. He was a player in a deadly game where family loyalty clashed with buried truths, and the price of discovery could be higher than he was ready to pay. And somewhere in the shadows, watching and waiting, the real enemy was still hiding, ready to strike when Jake least expected it. Jake's hands shook as he held the worn journal close, the weight of decades of secrets pressing down on him like the thick dust in the farmhouse air. The truth was finally within reach, but so was the danger. Determined, he decided it was time to confront his mother. If she had kept the necklace, if she had known Clara, then she held the final piece of this dark puzzle. Driving through the quiet town, Jake's heart raced. When his mother opened the door, her face was pale, her eyes flickering with a mix of fear and resignation. "I was waiting for you to come," she whispered. The walls between them cracked, years of silence breaking free. She confessed that Clara had been her sister. A secret hidden to protect them all. Clara had uncovered something terrible about their family, a truth some wanted to bury forever. Jake listened as his mother revealed the betrayal. Clara had planned to expose a powerful family member who had orchestrated the murder to protect their reputation. The necklace was more than jewelry, it was a symbol of that bond, a reminder of the truth Clara carried to her grave. His family had been living in shadows, weighed down by guilt and fear. But just as Jake absorbed the painful truth, a sudden knock shattered the fragile moment. The stranger, whose warnings had haunted Jake's every step, stepped into the light. His face was familiar, and suddenly Jake recognized him, his own uncle. The very man his mother had implicated in Clara's death. The uncle's cold voice sent chills through the room. "Some secrets should never come to light," he said. He confessed that he had hidden Clara's body in the farmhouse basement to keep the family's name clean and had been watching Jake all along, making sure no one disturbed the past. Jake's mind reeled, but he refused to back down. With his mother's support, he called the police. The truth was out, Clara's murder would no longer be a silent shadow over their family. As officers arrived, the uncle was taken away, his carefully built life unraveling in an instant. Just when Jake thought the nightmare was over, a final twist hit him like a thunderclap. Among the old letters in the chest, Jake found one last note, unsigned but clear: "The past is never done with us. Look deeper, or be lost to the silence." His eyes narrowed. The farmhouse held more secrets than he realized. The story wasn't finished. Not yet. And Jake knew that some shadows could stretch far beyond what anyone dared to imagine. After the police took Jake's uncle away, the farmhouse felt lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had been freed from a long-held breath of tension. Jake stood in the quiet room where so much had been revealed, the necklace now resting gently in his mother's hands. The painful truth had come to light, but the cost was clear. Families weren't perfect, and some secrets had the power to haunt generations. In the weeks that followed, Jake worked with the authorities and local historians to piece together the full story of Clara Marston. The evidence from the farmhouse, the skeleton, the letters, the journal, helped reopen the cold case, giving Clara the justice she had been denied for so long. It was a small victory, but it meant everything to Jake and his mother. Through it all, their relationship slowly began to heal. The silence that had hung between them for years gave way to honest conversations, shared grief, and a cautious hope for the future. Jake understood now that running from the past wouldn't bring peace, facing it head-on was the only way forward. The farmhouse, once a symbol of fear, had become a place of truth and healing. Neighbors who had avoided the place started stopping by, curious but respectful. The farmhouse wasn't just abandoned anymore, it was part of the town's history, a reminder of how deeply the past can reach into the present. Jake decided to restore the farmhouse, not to forget what happened, but to honor the memory of Clara and everyone affected by the long-hidden secrets. Yet, the final note Jake had found lingered in his mind. "Look deeper, or be lost to the silence." It was a warning, but also an invitation. He realized that every family, every community, had stories buried beneath the surface, stories that shaped who they were, even if they weren't easy to face. The necklace, once just a simple piece of jewelry, became a symbol of courage and connection. It reminded Jake that even when the past is painful, confronting it can bring healing and truth. And sometimes, the darkest places hold the strongest light. As Jake stood on the porch of the farmhouse one crisp morning, he looked out over the fields, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The mystery was no longer a shadow hanging over him, it was part of his story now, woven into the fabric of his life. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be perfect. Healing never was. But for the first time, Jake felt ready to face whatever came next, with open eyes, an open heart, and the courage to keep digging, no matter what lay beneath. The abandoned farmhouse had been more than a place to hide, it was where the past met the present, and where Jake found the strength to move forward. And in that, there was hope, not just for him, but for everyone who had been touched by the secrets buried beneath those broken floorboards. Sometimes, the hardest truths lead to the strongest beginnings.